Hey guys, Charles here with Rock Ready TV. About to do an install of some of our new high clearance trailing arms. These fit the RZR 1000 XP 2 and 4 seaters, the RZR XP Turbo 2 and 4 seaters, and the new RS1. This right here is what you get whenever you order these. You get the trailing arms, you get the zip ties, 2 bolts, 2 washers, and 2 nuts. These are a buddy of mine, and he also ordered the upgraded FK bearings, which are not in the picture because they are in the freezer, because that'll help make the install a little bit easier. You can reuse your stock spherical bearings, and you will have to use your stock C-clip. The FK bearings are a nice upgrade. They're cheap. They replace the stock spherical bearing. The FK is a USA made bearing. It's a fraction of the cost of a replacement Polaris bearing. The tolerances are a lot tighter on FK stuff. And I also get the ones that are Teflon lines, so it cuts down on squeaking. Like, they won't squeak for a really long time, and they'll last far longer before they start getting slop in them, like the stock Polaris unit. What's special about this design for the trailing arms is the way the shock mounts. It's hard to see with this black powder coat kind of, but you can see the shock actually sits down in here next to the trailing arm. Most of them you have 2 tabs that stick up on top of the trailing arm like a stock one, and they don't have as much ground clearance because of that. So you gotta imagine a stock trailing arm is 3 inches tall underneath here. And a lot of aftermarket ones use like 2-inch tube, so you know they get an extra inch of ground clearance, whereas these you get the full 3 inches. These trailing arms are made out of chromoly plate. So all this plate here, this is all chromoly. It's laser cut, CNC bend. Chromoly up here. This tube is a 2-inch quarter wall square tube. And then this machined end piece is 1018 steel. So 1018 steel is above mild steel, a little bit below chromoly steel. But that piece is far stronger than the piece that's the cast piece that's in your stock trailing arms. Alright, I already started the teardown on his RZR to install the trailing arms. This is a stock trailing arm with my upgraded weld-on gussets. These are only 50 bucks on my website, so if you don't have the money to spend on the full set of actual trailing arms, then this is a great upgrade, because these commonly bend right here underneath the shock. But to get these off, CV nut, take off your radius rod bolts, will come out. Take out the 2 bolts that hold the brake caliper up here, and then after that you can take out your bolts for your carrier, your hub carrier. And you've got 1 shock bolt, 1 sway bar bolt. It's kind of hard to see up there with the dark, but 1 bolt up there holding into the trailing arm. I would tear your RZR down to this right here when installing my trailing arms, and you'll see how this is cut and that's flipped over. You have to do that to run with my trailing arms, otherwise you're going to hit the tube. So tear it down to this point, and then you can either use a spring compressor and compress these shock springs up, or you can use your little shock tool that should have came with your RZR and loosen these up so that you can slide your springs up and take the load off of your little guard here, the little plate that runs underneath the spring. This one's already been flipped, but what you got to do is flip this over so that it looks like it does here, And then you'll see, normally there's a little piece that hangs down right here. This light. Normally there's a little piece that moves here and here. It just hangs down. You got to cut that off. You can use a razor blade, hacksaw, bandsaw, whatever. It comes off real easy. It's not hard to do. That's if you're going to continue to run the shock guards, which I do suggest. Those protect your shaft right here from getting beat up, and you don't start leaking your fluid out of your shock up here. But you got to flip those over on both sides. After that, you can pull a shock bolt out, pull a trailing arm bolt out up here, and you have to take off. These are already off here, but there's on the passenger side there are 4 P-clips. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then normally there's one right there in the frame. But you take these P-clips out. On the driver's side, there's 5 P-clips on the trailing arm itself. And you saw that my trailing arms come with zip ties for the brake line. The tabs on the trailing arm can go both ways. You can either reuse your P-clips, but you do have to go buy Allen head bolts or just some small 1/4 inch bolts, or you can run the zip ties. I run the zip ties, never had an issue. You won't have an issue either. Ultra 4 guys been attaching their stuff to their rigs with zip ties for years. You just go look at one and they're running the hardest races in the world, KOH and everything like that. But the option is there. That's why the tabs have a 1/4 inch hole. So if you'd like, you can reuse your P-clips. Alright, I'm going to start tearing this down. Alright, we got the trailing arm off the machine. These are the misalignment spacers that go inside of the spherical bearing. You're going to reuse these, so don't be losing those. This is the internal C-clip right here that you have to reuse. If you did not do the FK bearing upgrade, you're going to need to remove the bearing as well. He bought the FK, so we'll just leave that one in there. There's no need to pull it out. But you got to have the C-clip. Alright, I already got the FK spherical bearing in there along with the C-clip, but if you do not have a press, you can do what we just did, which is stack some blocks and then use a socket, Thor, your C-clip pliers. We used a little bit of silicone spray to lube it up. You can use some WD-40, helps as well. Like I said, we had these in the freezer for a while, so they dropped halfway down in there first, but these are machined to be a press fit, so they will be very tight going in there. Unless you're using a stock one, the stock spherical bearings can vary in their tolerances quite a bit, so they may or may not be as tight to go in there. But if you don't have a press, it can be done. The best way, of course, is to use the press, though. Alright, we got the trailing arm bolted in here using the stock misalignment spacers. It's got the FK uniball. Bolt that I provide goes through the shock. This all bolts up just like the factory does. Now for the brake line, I provide the 5 zip ties per trailing arm that you can put through. Zip ties will be fine. Ultra 4 guys run them forever. I run them, never had issues. If you do want to run your stock P-clamps, you can. You will just have to provide your own bolts and nuts for them. You'll just have to go get like some 1/4-20 by 3/4 inch or so length bolts and nuts, and you'll see the way these mounts are for the brake line. There's a round hole and then there's a slot. So, and the round hole will fit that 1/4-20 bolt. It's the same for these tabs up here. It might be hard to see with the light. But so you can use P-clamps. You just have to provide your own bolts if you want to do that route. Zip ties would be fine though. Alright, we got the trailing arm fully on there. Got the radius rods all bolted back on. While we had it off, we did the weld and bung upgrade, which is on my website as well. You can get them in M12 and M10 bolts. So check that out. You can see the clearance these have over a stock trailing arm. This is at ride height, and the trailing arm's above the skid plate all the way down. We also did the sway bar gussets. That really increases the strength of the sway bar mount so you don't break the welds off up there. Get your set at rockreadyutv.com.